Welcome to the introduction and chapter 1 of the new book, E-Myth Revisited, and this one happens to be with the HVAC contractor. So Michael Gerber wrote a few different books and kind of puts it in different industries. And even though there's not one on pressure washing, I find this one the best. I actually heard about this book from a few different people, but then I highlighted it on Tommy Mello's podcast, and I got to hear and see Ken Goodrich, and this is why I chose this one. But before I kind of go more into depth about what it talks about first, I wanted to kind of share a story. This one isn't like a normal help book. That sounds silly, doesn't it? Business help. This one isn't more of here are the numbers like I just read one written by an accountant. This one's a little different. This one will kind of not only get you angry, but to get you thinking. It's not an emotional book, but it will make you maybe a little emotional. It's not just because of the way it's a story, but it tells your story, my story, our story. Of things that we kind of go through. He seems to kind of get to know us like he's been spying on our business. Actually mentions that in here too. People say they feel like that when they read it. And let me kind of first start with the story before I talk about some of these points in the introduction. So he first starts talking about this family, Steve and Peggy Walsh, you see in chapter 1 here. This talks about this couple who met in college. It was pretty cool. They were both studying different things and found out that they started talking during some of their studies and then started talking after school, and that's kind of when the romance started. So sometimes I'll share a story with how my wife and I met years ago, also at school. Goodness gracious, it's been 22 years we've been married, 23 years, excuse me, so we've been married now, but and happily married, by the way. I think so. And moving on. So this is so cool. So the story starts out how they met, and then how they eventually got married. And he became working for an HVAC company. She went to work for a landscape company, kind of doing some design work. And after they got married, they had their first son, and we're super excited. Some of the things I kind of highlight in this book here is they were good years. Steve and Peggy loved each other very much, were very active members in their church, participated in community organizations, and spent quality time together. The Walshes consider themselves the most fortunate families they know. So this is talking about basically the life they had, they kind of dreamed about and came together. Now, let me tell you about it a little differently when he starts to say he wants to start his own business. So at work, he became more frustrated because he felt they're making decisions differently than he would want to make. He says, I want to start my own business. So they kind of had this talk before they got started. They asked themselves all the kind of questions that everyone probably should talk about before they start a business. But they never really drew up a concrete plan. Well, that's kind of different there. If we don't have a plan, we might plan to fail. So in the beginning, things went well when he started his own company. He started getting customers. Within a year, he had employed an office manager named Clarissa, and that was pretty good, having someone to help out in the office. Then he hired a bookkeeper that could help do the invoicing. After his very first year, they celebrated and took a family vacation. So things are going pretty well. Start here. But then things get a little bit differently as they kind of go on. And sometimes we find out in business, things aren't always as joyful as they were in the very beginning. I guess we call it the honeymoon phase kind of wears off. So now as he started growing the company, not only was Steve supervising all the jobs that his office manager and his bookkeeper did, he still also was looking for work to keep everybody busy. We kind of find that now I got to feed more than just my family. So some of the things he was doing is going to the bank, talking through customers' paperwork, talking to vendors, which he ended up arguing with different vendors, probably different contracts. He found himself spending more and more time on the telephone, dealing with customer complaints, and nurturing relationships. He's trying to do it all, right? Then he talks about the demands as things grew. The second year became a little more demanding on his time with the growth of the company. He began leaving home earlier in the morning, returning home later at night. We've done that. If I just work more, actually I just found myself saying that a couple of days ago, I just need to work more. But then this is the crazy part. As he was returning home later, he drank more and rarely saw his son anymore. So this is now talking about the pain is coming so much, so we're trying to do something to kind of calm ourselves down. For me, it could be a TV show or a snack or something like that. But rarely saw his son anymore. For those who have kids, we can kind of see where this is kind of going here. Money was also becoming a problem for Steve. And although the business was growing like crazy, it seemed to never have the money at the time he needed it. And why was some of that? Well, some of the billings that he was doing on customers, they weren't getting paid for over 90 days. So imagine you spend all the money, but the money isn't there from the customer. To make things worse, get this, Steve began to feel that his wife was insensitive to his troubles. I felt the same kind of way many times. Like, why don't they understand what we're going through as a business owner? I'm just highlighting simple things of the story. You got to read this thing for yourself here. But he would say, it's my responsibility to handle things in the office, and Peggy's responsibility to take care of her own job and the family at home. Right? Now we're going to departmentalize these things. It's my job to do the business. Business is business, he would say, and then she's take care of the home. Oh, let's see how this goes. So Peggy, the wife, figured out she'd take on more hours at her job to help out with some of the money, but then she wasn't at home as much, so they had to bring in a nanny to take care of the kid. And then, but she became more angry, and Steve thought, doesn't she seem that I had to come and take care of, that I'm doing all this for my family? And sometimes that kind of happens, right? The family starts getting a little frustrated, and like, well, can't you see what I'm doing all this? I started thinking I still think the same thing many times. If all the hard work I'm putting into this, it's for my kids. But when I get home and I need to do extra work, why can't they be quiet around me? Why can't they let me do this stuff? I'm doing this for them. But not surprisingly, Peggy, the wife, grew more frustrated about her husband's lack of communication. Meanwhile, the bookkeeper was becoming a problem for Steve. Tim, the bookkeeper, never seemed to have the financial information Steve needed to make decisions about payroll, customer billing, and general operating expenses. Yeah, I had that problem too. At least, I need certain numbers to make decisions, right? Excuse me. If I can just see a little bit further ahead, I can navigate the ship before it hits an iceberg. Those are the kind of things we think. I need the numbers to make decisions, but here Tim wasn't getting him those kind of numbers, which is really interesting though, because Tim said, look, I got a lot of things to do here. You don't know what I'm doing. And then overwhelming Steve usually would back off because the last thing he wanted to do is upset the bookkeeper and have to do the books for himself. Yeah, I need to hold on to this person, even though maybe in my mind they're not fulfilling what I need. If they quit, it could be a lot worse. But then, as things kind of grew on, Steve began living his life in his head and started distrusting people. Then one day, the office manager, Clarissa, quit because she was mad about the amount of work her boss was demanding of her. Sometimes we get a little frustrated when we seem like we're doing all the work around here, trying to direct everything and having to manage every single job every person's doing, from the technicians to the bookkeeper to the office manager. If she quits and you feel like, why is she abandoning what we're doing here? And then you kind of find out that Steve was actually clueless to the work that she was doing, and Steve became overwhelmed having to pick up the pieces of the job he didn't really understand. Her workplace was a disaster. Why was that? Maybe it's a personality, or maybe it's just a lack of direction what she should have been doing. In your mind, and Steve's going, what was she thinking during all this process? Why was her desk this kind of way? And when he got home that night, he was angry, so he got on a shouting match with his wife. And then he left out to go get a drink. Doesn't anybody understand him? Didn't anybody care what he was going through? Oh, gosh, doesn't this kind of get you sometimes? Where, does anybody really care what we're going through as a business owner? Well, this isn't a poo-poo on us kind of deal. This one is to kind of understand that maybe this author has something to share that he knows better than we do. And this is one of the things highlighted here. If the business takes more than it gives, the family is always the first to pay the price. It talks about Steve's business consumed him because he lacked a true understanding of the essential strategic thinking that would have allowed him to create something unique. Steve was doomed from day one. So this book contains, this is reading right from the book here, this book contains secrets that Steve should have known. And if you follow Steve's footsteps, prepare to have your life and business fall apart. But if you apply the principles we'll discuss here, you can avoid a similar fate. That's a true story, by the way. This author has met a lot of different business owners in that one. And some of the highlights I kind of got from this, and yeah, I'm a little choked up, wouldn't you be? And you're probably feeling the same way. So one thing you want to do is grab a copy of whatever E-Myth one you feel is the best for you. If you're an electrician or a plumber, HVAC, or a chief finance officer, it has a lot of different versions on there. It doesn't have one for pressure washing or window cleaners, but this one I found to be kind of the best one though for me. But some of the observations I got from here. Ken Goodrich, the co-author of this one, like I said, I heard him speak on Tom Mel's podcast. He talked about in this book that he read this book 39 times. 39 times. And talks about his story a little bit as well. Of how he bought his family business when his father passed away. It made tons and tons of mistakes. We've all made mistakes. I'm not perfect as well, so I'm learning with you. But why did he read it 39 times? Well, he felt like that's what it took to master it. One of the things I think about is, my questions I asked myself, if it took him 39 times to become a master, are there books that I have read multiple times? Not really. Actually, I started reading this book, and I read it almost all the way through a couple of years ago, and I'm really looking forward to actually picking up and reading it through again. And then, if it takes multiple times to read and understand, what is stopping me, or what am I allowing to stop me from mastering at least one book? Now, I'm not trying to say I'm becoming a book nerd here, but for us starting a business, we started for a reason, for a purpose, how it's going to help our family, be able to take them on vacations and those kind of things, or just like to be a person in our community that we want to be. Be the kind of dad or mom that comes home and your kids are excited to see you, and you hear great comments from their teachers because they're so involved in classmates. They just want to, be, to me, my kids be an encouragement to other people as well. All those kind of things we dream about. What stops us from learning where other people have learned, how we can apply that in our life? Why do we feel like we have to be the pioneer to go out and try to start something different that's actually not so different when you start reading this book and we come home shot full of arrows? So that's one of the observations here, kind of chapter 1. So to highlight there, now to kind of go back from that story, some of the first thing he talks about is even if your family doesn't work in the business, it's still a family business because my family is affected greatly by the decisions I make at home, or at my business, which is really weird because what happens in the business happens in the home. He highlighted if you're angry at work, you're probably angry at home. If you have trouble with money at work, you're going to have trouble with money at home. If the communication is an issue at work, communication is going to be an issue at home. If you have a trust issue at work, you have trust issues at home. If you feel like you're out of control at work, you're probably out of control at home too. That's not why we started this business, is it? So one of my observations for myself was, what am I going through right now that I'm going through at home? Part of mine is starting something different here in the company, and it takes a lot more time to mentally prepare for that, start making a new plan. And then I'm going, well, is everything else kind of being taken care of? Do I have a plan to take care of the things that I'm not going to be doing? We hired a new production manager, doing a great job, but I still need to kind of, download the things that I want him to do, and you're going to learn in this book how to create a system so he feels successful, so he doesn't feel like, in that story, overwhelmed or underappreciated, or so he doesn't get driven to the point like Clarissa and says, I'm out of here because you don't understand what I'm doing and I'm tired of this demands. So how do we create those kind of systems to help them be successful so we can take on new ventures as well? That's what I'm looking for. I'm really looking forward to reading this book again. I really am. So it's some of the things to talk about here. If we feel like, a lot of people have, business is business, family is family. We try to say there's two different things, but this is the crazy part is, if we try to keep our family and business apart, then we create two different worlds. And one thing I realized, I used to be in restaurant management for years. A lot of people have. A lot of people start out in restaurants. I was actually operationally approved to be a multi-unit franchisee for a pizza place called Cece's Pizza. Years ago. I love pizza, right? Hard to believe, right? But what I found out is most successful restaurant owners, and I haven't surveyed everybody in the world, but most successful restaurant owners were either single or divorced. What? Why? Because they try to keep those two apart. Imagine your business is now like the second spouse that your spouse has to put up with. How can we help these actually work together to serve each other? That's one of the observations I had on there. And if the business is taking more than it gives, then the family is the first to pay the price. So that's kind of highlights it from chapter 1 there. I'm really looking forward to then. So after the chapter 1, then Ken Goodrich writes his version as well in that first kind of chapter. So you kind of see that in how he applies it in his business, which I'm really looking forward to as well. So stay tuned for the next chapter here. Make sure you're getting a copy of the E-Myth. I'll put a link in the comments there that you can find on Amazon. And man, I'm really looking forward to this one. I think this is going to be a good way to start our morning every day. Look forward to seeing you the next time.